Welcome to Talking with Sapna. Today we're going to be talking about expectations with your children. You all have expectations for your children, whether it's about what you want them to achieve academically, what you want them to achieve personally, how you want them to uphold your values or your culture. There are so many different things that you expect of them. What I want to do today is delve into this idea of expectation and to talk to you about expectations versus standards. Because often what I find is that the expectations we have are in fact not expectations, they're standards. And I'm going to differentiate between the two to try and get us to really reflect on whether the expectations we have for our children are realistic for them or whether it's more about them being realistic for you. I want to start with a little story. So I recently got this t-shirt that I'm wearing. My Nike Just Do It t-shirt. And when I put it on, I had this light bulb moment, I guess, where I thought that, how often do you say that to your child? Just do it. You can do it. Because I know it's something that I used to encourage my students at school with all the time. Just do it. You can do it. But what it made me think was, when we say that, are we ourselves doing that? What we're asking of our children, are you as the adults willing to do the same? Because what I realized was we often ask our children to be brave, to be strong, to be confident, to be courageous. And you'll ask them to try new things and give things a go and step outside of their comfort zone. But my question to you is, do you do that as well? Because if you yourself as the parent or me as the educator, if I'm not willing to do what I'm asking my students to do, and if you are not doing what you're asking your children to do, then you have no right to ask them to do it. I remember once at a school assembly, one of my students had reached state level in running, and it had been really quiet. He'd done it under the radar and we'd acknowledged him at the assembly. And at the same assembly, I was being acknowledged for an award I'd won at a state level by my parents from my class. And we both won these awards, and as we were walking out, I was having this conversation with this student about how I wanted him to be proud and I wanted him to stand up tall and accept the praise. And he turned around to me and said, "I will when you do." And it was such a humbling moment, because here I was telling him to stand up and be proud, and I myself was not owning the success that I had had. And it really, when I saw this Just Do It, it reminded me of that your children are a mirror to the expectations you hold of yourself. So in this situation, I was not willing to stand proud and accept this award. So how could I ask any different of my student? And that's what we talk about when we talk about expectation. That integrity between asking something of them that you would do yourself and modeling it. Show them that you would never ask them to do something you yourself wouldn't be able to do or wouldn't be willing to do. But even more than that, the way I see expectations are, they're fluid, they're individualized, they're targeted. So the expectation you might have of one child might look very different for another child in certain areas. Yeah, there's some places where you have to have the consistency of expectations, around what they do in the household or attending school and all of those sort of things. But in terms of the level of achievement or how they go about achieving things or the timing, it's very much based on what your individual child has the capacity for and how they operate and how they respond to things. So for me, expectations are co-created because you're understanding the needs of your child while you're creating those expectations, but also they're movable. It's not a fixed point. It links a bit to a growth mindset where it moves, it ebbs and flows as they learn new things, as they grow, as they pick up. But for me, a standard is that fixed level where you go, this is where I want my children to be. And regardless of capacity, ability, age, this is where I want them to be. Standards are rigid. They are what create fixed mindsets. Whereas expectations are open, they're understanding of a person's individual abilities, strengths, talents. One thing I've observed and noticed is often as parents, you have a standard that you think is an expectation, but it's not as fluid or as movable. So look at those things and be honest with yourself. Is it a standard you're not willing to move, or is it an expectation that moves with your child, with their strengths, with their abilities? The first step in setting expectations for your child is to actually acknowledge where and why you've had standards there before, and also acknowledging why you want those expectations there. It's often said that having high expectations helps people lift, and it does, absolutely. I noticed it in the classroom. When I had high expectations, my students pulled up. But those high expectations look different for each child. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all standard. It was varying expectations. That for Johnny might have been here, for Andy it might have been here, for Lexi it might have been here, because it was based on their individual strengths, abilities, and capacity. It allows them to work towards that high expectation and feel good when they reach those little steps along the way. So when you think about your child and your children, what are the high expectations you hold for them? And have you tailored them to their individual needs and strengths? Or have you set this one line, one standard, one ceiling that you expect the whole family to achieve? Because is that really reasonable or fair? And you know that children are all about fairness, but having high expectations that are suited and tailored to your child is also fair. And it's important to have those conversations with your children, to acknowledge that they're each different and they each have their different strengths. Because if you can teach your children from a young age to accept their uniqueness, to accept their individual strengths rather than always comparing to others, you're helping them for the rest of their life. Because as they get older, they'll stop comparing themselves to everyone else and they'll be able to stand in their own light and celebrate that. And isn't that what we want for all our kids? I know as an adult, that's what I wish I had more of. I wish I hadn't spent so much of my life constantly comparing to other people, but having the strength to stand in my own light, my own ability, my own capacity. And so by having high expectations tailored to your children, that's what you are empowering them to do, to acknowledge their uniqueness, to acknowledge their capacity and their strengths, and to own that. And as a parent, isn't that what you want for your child? So stop, reflect. What are the expectations you have for your child? Are they expectations or are they standards? And if they're expectations, are you holding yourself to the same expectations? Are you asking of your children what you are willing to do yourself? Take the time to stop and reflect on it and see the shifts in connection it brings between you and your children.